Hello, welcome to Awaken Your Creative Self. I am your host, Claudia Chen. I'm really excited to bring on today's guest expert, named one of the 40 under 40 business leaders. He is an award-winning entrepreneur, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and emerging tech strategist who combines the mindsets of an artist and a technologist. He is part of the innovation team at Autodesk and leads the industry academic and startup relationships within construction, robotics, AI, manufacturing, and blockchain. He works with and advises tech, cryptocurrency, and creative companies on PR, marketing, product launches, and customer engagement. I'd like to present to you Yuri Cataldo. Hi, Yuri. Welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Hi, Claudia. Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yes, so Yuri, I found out that you're super talented, especially in how you're able to grab the attention of the press to write your stories. So let's start from the beginning. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you become such a great storyteller?
Sure. Sure. So my background is in theater, and so that's probably where my ability to tell a good story came from. I'm a classically trained set and costume designer, which doesn't fit on my bio anymore, and it's a little less relevant, unfortunately. But 10 years ago, I was working on Broadway as an assistant designer on a couple different shows before the last economic downturn.
Mhm.
So in most of my 20s, I spent a lot of time learning the elements of storytelling, usually through theater and television. And what happened after that was once the economy collapsed, I moved back to Indiana, which I'm from originally, from New York, and then had to kind of start things over again and learn how to weave what I had done in the past with what I wanted to do in the future, and started a whole new career path, which is um, highlighted by the lovely bio that you read, which I I appreciate. But that led into me starting my own company, and that's where I learned how to apply a lot of the ideas I was learning in theater, as well as some of the theoretical ideas I was learning by reading and kind of just doing it. And that has kind of just like helped me launch up from there. And then since then, I've been part of startups, advised startups, helped other teams launch their products and talk about storytelling. But yeah, it's kind of like the core of, now that we're talking about it, it's kind of the core of what I do, just in different elements in different areas.
It does, because with you being so creative, you're just able to apply all those things that you've learned into everything that you've touched. And because with you being such a creative and being so broad, Yuri, what does creativity mean to you? And why do you think that people should tap into their creative side?
Sure. So it's, you know, creativity, and it's probably like more of like a textbook definition of turning something new and imaginative into reality. And that's when I look at everything that I've done, whether it's a more creative side of like the theater world where I'm making a play versus creating a company. That's what that really is. It's an idea. I'm doing it right. Doing it right now. Before we had this call, I'm trying to come up with a couple of different ideas for potential companies. And that's being creative. It's taking this imaginary idea based off of what I see around the world, and then taking all my experiences and creating something new. And so what's great, and this is why everybody should try to tap into that creativity, is you are perceiving something new. There's patterns that you are noticing. And because of each of our own unique experiences, we each see the world in a little bit different way. So all of us are noticing things that are unique to us. And so we can perceive the world, find these hidden patterns, and create something new and imaginative. And that's what's really needed in every field and every walk of life. That's what everybody, like right now, the buzzword is innovation. And I live in that world. And that's exactly what innovation is. It's trying to create something new, but that's like the business term of it.
Yeah, that is definitely the broader term of creativity, just because it just applies across the board, whether you're working every day at a company or whether you're having your own business. It definitely is something that we need to tap into.
Yeah.
Now, let's go on a little bit deeper. Could you share with us why storytelling is so important when it comes to you promoting yourself, or whether you're looking for a job or you're promoting your business? What are the elements in storytelling that is so important that we need to use that as a promotion strategy?
Sure. So storytelling is particularly important because we as humans, we gravitate towards stories. Like if you think about different parables, like, you know, regardless of your thoughts on the Bible, like the Bible is a very long story, and there are different elements that are pulled out that people use all the time to illustrate points, but they're not specific facts. They are parables. That's how our minds work. That's how we relate. That's why we're able to remember stories more so than like hard facts. And it's actually regardless again of what you think about the political landscape of the United States right now, there is one particular candidate who likes to tell stories. Whether or not they're fact-based or not is not part of it, but they're emotionally driven stories, and there are people who react to those stories very passionately. That's one of the things that make us the most human, is that we, as rational as we like to think we are all really emotional people who react in different ways to things that we're told, regardless of the actual facts of things. So being able to tell a good story is being able to reach the person that you're trying to persuade and communicate with at their most basic human level, and persuade them through their emotions. And so being good at telling a story is actually can kind of make or break what your goal is, because we've probably all been to a party or a bonfire, some kind of thing, where there's just like somebody who's just telling this tale, and there's too much detail, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. You're like, oh my God, please just get to the point. So there's there's some nuance in all of this, but ultimately they're telling a story. And boring or not, I bet you probably still remember those stories that somebody tried to tell you that weren't very interesting.
This is so exciting, just because I also believe that having a great story, it's one of the most important things that you can do, especially if you are thinking of starting a business, or you already have a business. It's that connection piece that you want to capture. Now, let's get into the meat and potato of this. For the people who have no idea how to go about putting together a story, Yuri, could you walk us through some of the important elements in creating a captivating story?
Sure. So there's a couple of things you should think about. So first and foremost is you want to think like a journalist. And there's a reason why journalists, again, are really good at telling stories. Every good journalist will hit 5 key things right off the bat: the who, what, where, when, why. Who, what, where, and why. Okay, good, I got 5. And so that's when you're telling a story, that is what you need to include, because it's all the relevant information. And the most important element of that is who you are trying to communicate to. So again, me telling a story to you right now, Claudia, about what I did earlier today, I mean, maybe that's interesting, but probably not, unless you were, part of that earlier conversation. So knowing that if I want to persuade you to be, either be, to hire me for something or to buy a product from me, I have to know who you are, what you're interested in, and then how to tell my story around that. So it's really keying in on who your target person is, who your target market is, and who actually your target person is. And then telling them the key things that they need to know in a way that will persuade them. And it requires a lot of effort and a lot of work to plan all that out. And it's not something that you're just like, great, I'm going to write this exact moment and I'll be done in 5 minutes. It's a process. It takes time to really key in, but those are kind of the, if you nail those 2 things of who you're trying to communicate with, and then these key who, what, where, when, how type of things, then you're like 90% of the way right there. Other than that, that was just like the really detailed, nuanced stuff of trying to use words that bring in people's imagination versus, you know, words that stop them. But that might
Right.
be a whole like second layer behind this.
Now, I have a question for you then. So,
Sure.
do you suggest that people come up with the product first, like something that they're passionate to work on, and then look for the people who are the market audience, or think of their target audience first and then come up with the product? Like, because I hear both
Right.
sides, right? Because like
Yeah.
some people are like, oh, I am really passionate in doing this, so then there are always someone who are attracted to your work, while others is like, okay, I need to solve a problem that you see, and then you go create something for them. So what's your take on that?
Yeah. So, so I see this a lot. Nowadays I spend a lot more time with tech companies, and I see this especially with engineers who are they have created a problem in search of a solution. I'm sorry, they create a solution in search of a problem. Reverse it. And so what my recommendation is to start off with finding an audience that you know has this problem, because it will make your solution, your product, your service, whatever that is, so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
It also will help you test it out, because so let's say, for example, I'm, creating, I've got this next to me. So I'm creating this for you and your audience. If I made it ahead of time, now I'm presenting it and I'm guessing that maybe this might be something you like, which this is my iPhone earbud holder. It may be something that you like based off of the fact that you have iPhone earbuds right now, but you may not like the fact that they are wireless or something else like that. But had we had this conversation ahead of time and I found out that, you like iPhone earheads or earphones and you are tired of all these cords coming around, then me presenting this and saying, oh, by the way, I have a solution for you. These are wireless earbuds. I've now already solved your problem ahead of time and made it easier for you to say yes versus the other way around. It also meant that I could save a lot more money that way too. So if I had a
Mm-hmm.
conversation with you ahead of time and I know what you're interested in, I
Mm-hmm.
can test it by, doing a prototype, or that's oftentimes what Kickstarter and Indiegogo accounts are. It's people who have a really good idea and are looking to see where their audience lies and trying
Mm-hmm.
to hone in on that audience. So oftentimes, by going audience first, you then can save yourself time and money, and you also know if you're wasting your time. Like
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, if I'm trying to, sell a product that you're not interested in, then I know either I shouldn't try to sell you as a customer, or stop that product and go do something else.
That is that's always the story that I hear, or the strategy that I hear, that you look for the problem and you look for the problem and then you come up with a solution. Now, for
Yeah.
people like me, I'm a calligrapher and engraver, and there are also other people who may be making artwork and things like that. What then is your solution to them finding that target market then, like in terms of crafting that story, looking for their target audience?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are people who are in that realm of that creative side. So
Yeah.
could you share with us a little bit about that?
Sure. And so with this also, regardless of whether it is your company is, and again, I spend a lot more time with software companies nowadays, and there's a different goal in mind with a software company versus one that's more on the creative side. So it really comes down to knowing what your ultimate goals are. So is your ultimate goal trying to get VC funding and to scale this up to eventually go public, like a lot of the software companies are? Or is your goal here to have a company that's sustainable, that you could hire a few employees? Or is your goal to have a smaller company than that? They're called lifestyle brands, where you're not, it's something you do in your spare time, or maybe it takes over your full-time income, but you're not employing anybody. It's you who does that product and creates this lifestyle that you want, that, pulls in a certain amount of money. Or is it a hobby? And a hobby is something that you're not that you are okay with not making a lot of money at. So it depends on where, and those are just some, again, 5 random examples. So it depends on where you want this to go and where you fall on that, because there are people who are very successful at all levels of this. And so just because you're having, let's say, a more creative type of business versus a software company, it doesn't mean that you can't eventually, go public and create this multi-billion-dollar company that gets sold. I mean, that's what the movie business is, and that's what large Broadway theaters are. That's what they started as smaller and they ramped up. So that's what it depends on what your end goal is. But let's say, like in your instance, your calligraphy and engraving company.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say you want to grow it into a larger company where you can hire multiple people and quit your day job and it be its own self-sustaining company. So first off, what you have to start doing is bring in some more business. And with that, you need to analyze exactly what type of customers you have right now and which ones are paying you the most often. So to do this, there's an economic theory that comes out that's very, very familiar now. It's called the 80-20 law, the Pareto principle, which is that 80% of your results come from 20% of the effort. And so you have to sit down and actually analyze your company on a more business objective level and look at the actual data and say, so I worked with this type of individual and they have a tendency of paying me more and more often. So then you start shifting and finding more people like that. And then from there, maybe it's expanding of, so, I'm going to guess the wedding industry probably is your biggest, is the biggest, at least in the calligraphy market, because there's probably a lot of couples who like a handwritten note. So let's say that it is for this hypothetical situation. And so from there, you might think, okay, so I know couples and weddings are definitely where my bread and butter is. How do I get more of those? Well, you can try to, just individually book more people through your website, or you can try to scale up a little bit and try to go where they go. So I think it's called The Knot. They're a really big website called The Knot. Maybe you have a partnership with The Knot, or maybe you have a partnership with a bridal boutique in your area, or all of the above. And so when people come in and let's say you make a deal, people come in and they get a bridal dress and they're also buying your services, or wedding planners. You start working with wedding planners and you go the next level. At a certain point, you will be too busy to be able to do all of these yourselves. And so once you get to that level, then you have to figure out, do I hire other people or what do I do? But ultimately, it's like you look at what your end goal is, and then you take baby steps to get there. Like if right now you were like, great, Yuri, I want my company to make $1 million worth of revenue in the next week. If you went from wherever you are right now to $1 million in a week, you may actually like work yourself to death or be so overwhelmed that you're just like, I'm not even going to start. And so part of that also is it is very possible for your business to create more than $1 million worth of business, but you have to take slow steps to get up there and to analyze your company every step of the way and find out what you actually want to do and what you're actually capable of. The reality may be you don't actually want that. You may want just a lifestyle business that brings in a few $100,000 that allows you to travel the world and do this in your spare time. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but it really comes down to knowing what you want. And so like on the creative side, knowing exactly what you want out of your creative business. So like when I was a designer, from the beginning, I knew I wanted to be a designer on Broadway, and that's only thing I focused on, even from college, actually. The moment I decided I wanted to be a designer, I started talking to other designers who worked on Broadway and find out how they got there, and then I backtracked. So this concept is called future back. So you look at the future of where your industry is going or where you want to be, and you start looking at the companies who are operating there or the people who have already there. So like in that instance, there were already people who were working on Broadway. And so the easiest thing for me to do was to ask them how they got there and to try to forge a path that way. It's very similar in companies too, is looking at other companies who are where you want to be and looking at and following a path of how they got there.
Wow, I have to say thank you so much. This is so much information and so impactful. And definitely, I think a lot of the people who are in this industry, because I also know a lot of people who are calligraphers or engravers, and they do work with wedding couples and wedding businesses. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now, I know you created your water business, your Indigo H2O business. Could you tell us a little bit more about that story and how you were able to grow to such a big scale in such a short time?
Sure. So I have always been fascinated by water, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but that's initially where my ideas with this came from. And that fascination with water came from my own health problems. And so at 16, 17, I was diagnosed with a condition called thalassemia minora, which basically just means that my red blood cells are smaller than the average person's. And so when I turned 16 or 17, somewhere around there, when I was in school, I went from a very healthy, like active teenager to being exhausted all the time. So if you've ever had mono, that's what it felt like. Like I just always had mono. And so I went to a few different doctors and they diagnosed me with my condition, and there's nothing you can really do about it. They said, take more iron supplements, which didn't really help much. So through some introductions, my parents and I went to a natural doctor who looked at my diet and exercise and my body in a more holistic way, trying to balance different areas. And one thing we realized was that I was not drinking nearly enough water. And so from there, I kind of got obsessed with it, just because I realized that the healthier I was eating and the more water I was drinking, the better I felt. And so it was like trying to keep going with the positive. And so from an early age, I was fascinated by water and the types of water out there. And then I kind of dabbled a little bit into what was happening with bottled water, then forgot about it. 10 years later, my design world collapses. I go back to my parents' house and I'm sitting there realizing that my design career, as I wanted to do it, could no longer exist. 2008, Broadway shut down. It's not as bad as it is right now. Unfortunately, right now, there are a lot of people who are in my same career who, like, industries are shutting down. Back then, it was just basically me and a few other people. But my design career couldn't happen anymore. The life I wanted to live couldn't happen anymore. I went through a divorce at that exact same time. And so everything got very difficult. So back at my parents' house, living in my childhood bedroom, and I start to look at the future I want to have. And I realized that I wanted to start a company, but I didn't know where to start. And so I spent a lot of time actually at Barnes and Nobles, back when they actually had physical Barnes and Nobles. And I would start reading a lot of different business books, and they all recommended starting with something that you knew and that you could control. And so I realized that I knew the bottled water industry fairly well, just because of my own fascination. And so I started there and thought, okay, water, interesting. People need water. Let's just see what I can do. And it took me, because I started from nothing, about a year to come up with the idea. Fortunately, I have also met some really smart people along the way who helped me. Well, one of which, my parents' best friends, they started an online furniture company in the late 1990s, and it went to become the world's largest online furniture retailer before the first dot-com bust. And so they sold this company for millions of dollars and became consultants. And then right before their company entity kind of collapsed. And so I went and spoke with them. They loved the idea of what I was doing, and they thought, why not? Let's help somebody get started. So they helped me build this very terrible e-commerce site, and I got to learn by doing how to sell something online. And a lot of it is basically how do you translate a story to a website so that when somebody comes and they see it for the first time, they're like, yes, I want to buy your product. Like, that's we make snap decisions like that within like 3 seconds. I mean, it's, again, we all like to think that we're very rational creatures who really analyze everything, but really, if there's a few kind of key things that provoke our imagination, our interest, we will go from let me see more to buying it, especially if it's in a price range that we think is reasonable. And so I spent a lot of time learning this, and then launched my company. The first iteration of it was called Simple H2O, actually Simple Water. And that's where I launched it as. And I unfortunately don't have any of the bottles around me. They're actually, the samples are at my parents' house. The company doesn't exist anymore, which is also why I don't have them. But it was called Simple Water because my whole tagline was water should be simple. And I also had the advantage in that the water on my parents' property, Indiana, was already really good. And so I had it tested. Again, I also had another advantage that my dad at one point wanted to have a catering business. So he built this freestanding facility on the property that was already approved by the Department of Health. And so my startup costs initially were only $300. And that's because I just happened to have an advantage by using what was around me to help launch this company. Now, had I wanted to launch this company at any other time, like right now, a facility minimally costs $1 million. So I had a little bit of help on that one. And so I tested the water. The water was awesome. It was great. I then was trying to figure out, let's say, how do I bottle this? And again, my dad is a winemaker, and I've spent a lot of time bottling wine with him. So I was like, aha, I know I can get access to wine bottles cheaply, and I know how to bottle them because I bottle wine. Why can't I just simulate that in this facility myself and bottle water that way? So I went to the wine store and I bought every different color of wine bottle they had. And later that night I went to a party with some friends of mine, and I walked around, I put water in there and I put a cork on there, and I walked around selling water to people. And I wanted to test out what colors they were most attracted to and how much they would pay for this. Because there wasn't any labels or anything. It was just wine bottle full of water. And so I was walking around selling it. And then the last one I sold, which I got the most for, was a cobalt blue glass bottle. And the young lady buying it did so because she wanted it for a vase. So she didn't really care what was in it, but I think she gave me $2 for it, which was the most out of like green, and there was orange and everything else. And so I thought, this makes even more sense. Like, who doesn't want a beautiful blue bottle of water? Like, it screams refreshing. And so that's where I got that idea from. And then also in the area, I walked over to a label company because I'm from Indiana and it's a very industrial area. So there was a label company. And I went over, I told them what my idea was, and they created, because they always do this for everybody, they created a few samples for free for me because they wanted me to, obviously, long term. So they sent me all these free samples. I picked the one I liked the most. I taped it onto the bottle, and I started doing photo shoots with the bottle in different areas. And then I photoshopped it together, crafted together a website. This was 2011, and I launched it January 2011. This terrible, terrible website with these like bottles up there. And I was like, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to, I had $300. I'm going to spend that money on Google advertising and learning about Google advertising. And we're going to test this out. And if nobody buys any water in the next month, or if I run out of money, then I know this was a stupid idea and I'm going to move it on. So in one way, I kind of did opposite of the advice I just gave you. I also didn't know any better back then, in that I kind of created a product first, but I did it in a very cheap way, in that I didn't actually own anything. So I set this up so I knew that if somebody were to buy enough water, I could create this in like 10 days. But I didn't go ahead and I didn't buy a supply. Like, I didn't buy all the bottles first and the labels and bottle it and like have a supply that I was trying to sell. I did it the other way. I pretended that I did. So I kind of did like what Kickstarter does right now. I did an early Kickstarter before there was Kickstarter. So I launched it. Within like a month, I had sales for $1,000 worth of water.
Wow.
And I was like, great, I guess I got a company now. And so we'll do it. And so I figured all that out and crafted it together. Within 6 months, I changed the company name to Indigo H2O. And I did it for a very important reason. when you Googled Simple Water at that time, the only thing that came up was like my company, but at the top was this thing that said Simple Water Scam. There was a company in Canada that was going in and it was scamming old people into buying water filters. And so they dominated the market. And I was like, listen, I can't have people Googling Simple Water and the first thing they see is Simple Water Scam. So I sat down with a friend of mine, like we had a couple drinks, trying to figure out what this was. And at some point, because the bottles are blue, he was like, indigo. And we're like, yeah, like indigo water, indigo H2O. And he's like, wait, stop right there. And the name Indigo H2O has this kind of cool like rhythm to it. And when I mentioned it to a couple of my friends, they started singing it back to me. And so I was like, great. So I've got a name of a company that rhymes enough, people like it, let's go with it. And the moment I changed that, my bottled water started getting a lot more press. Now, part of it is because of my own knowledge, but it was featured in more places, got a lot more press, sales went up a lot more, and kind of jumped from there. Right after that, they were invited to be part of the MTV Video Music Award gift bags. And that was 2013, I think, was the first time that I got them in. So that was like the start of me figuring out how to get them into gift bags. And so I would do that every year. I got them in the Oscars, the Emmys, the Golden Globes. They were also part of like individual gifting suites and other places. I also figured out shortly after that there is international water tasting events, which I'm not sure if you knew they existed. They do. The biggest one is in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and it happens every February. And so the year I figured that out, I submitted our water in, and we got third place. The second year I submitted it, we got second place. And then the last year we won, which was great. And so I have a little water drop trophy in my basement somewhere. But all of these events helped me then get more press, more marketing, more publicity, which then helped launch the company even more. And if you coupled that, because I know this is coming up with one of your questions of like, what kind of makes this interesting? And what I was able to do, and this is actually still why I get hired to do this a lot for other things, is I made water sexy, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do because everybody wants to have their own water brand or just liquid brand of that kind of stuff. And so if you're really thinking about it, like this is like tap water, but I was able to get people to buy this. Granted, what I was selling was a little nicer, had a little more flavor to it, but I told a better story about what my water was, and I packaged it in a beautiful, tall blue bottle, and I made it sound sexy, and I made it sound special, and I made it sound like if you were to drink this water, you were smarter than other people, because you realized that the elements of this water were alkaline, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff with it, but that's what it came down to. And so I made that water sound sexy, and sexy water I got for $8 a bottle.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. I love listening to your water story. And I am just so impressed with the way that you're able to bring this story into press and letting it roll out bigger and bigger and bigger. So before I know this is the next set of questions that I would like to get into, because this is why I'm talking to you today. So before we get into press, what does it mean to get press? Like, how is it different? I'm sure people know the difference, but maybe some don't. What does it mean to get press, and how is that different from advertisement, and why should people consider this route?
Sure. So getting press, or it's more of a public relations type of setup. It's different from normal advertising in that you don't pay for it. So and I say that with like a caveat, because technically you can buy your way into a lot of these magazines, but I haven't ever. So what they're able to do is, by being featured in different, and we're saying like traditional media outlets, so magazines, TV, newspapers, websites now, but traditional media, what happens is you get to trade off of their notoriety, and people automatically assume you are a certain thing because you showed up in this article. So, the New York Times, Forbes, Inc. magazine, all of those have a certain weight and caveat surrounding them. And it doesn't matter how easy or difficult it was for you to get into there and get featured. The fact that your company or you are featured in those, it means a certain thing to people. Again, it's all part of this, the story we all tell ourselves about what that means and what that notoriety means. So if I tell you that, again, that I was a 40 under 40, it doesn't necessarily matter how easy that was, and the fact that, I did it in a different kind of way. All you hear is 40 under 40, and it has a certain gravitas and a weight that you assign to it. Or that, I was in Inc. magazine or the, Discovery Channel. That's what part of the story is. And that's why it's important, because it's, you can do a lot of advertising, and I actually recommend that people do. So the thing with public relations is that you can't count on constantly being featured in the media. It's like it's great little bonus that helps everything else. You need to do it along with your traditional inbound or outbound marketing techniques. But what it will do is give you an extra boost every once in a while, and it can potentially catapult you into a whole new level. It's happened a lot with, like, in Oprah's favorite things or Oprah's book club. Like, you can't put a price tag on that, because if Oprah says that you're her favorite thing, there are dozens of stories. Like, that's what PR is. Like, suddenly there's dozens of stories of companies or who were like, I sold a few hundred, and then Oprah mentioned us, and then now we were selling a few million, because that's how much people wanted to buy things that Oprah likes.
Wow. Yes, of course. So having said this, could you speak to the misconception that, because it seems like, I'm sure there is a difficulty getting into press now, but can you speak to the misconception of, can people who are just normal like me and some other people, my friends, can we actually bring that to press, offering up products and services?
Sure, of course. And you're right. It's, it's so much, it feels like it's so much easier when you see someone like, let's say, Ryan Reynolds and whatever company he's got now, because he already has a certain notoriety around his name. And, he says he's selling gin, which, by the way, I think his gin is very, very good. And I believe he just sold his gin company for a lot of money. So, so good on that. But yes, so you need to kind of think of it the other way around. So if you look at all of the media outlets out there right now, from like Inc. magazine to Huffington Post to all the traditional media outlets, what they need clicks. And how do they get clicks is through stories. And so what you have an opportunity right now is, you as the potential story have an advantage, because they need you. They need your story. They need your product. They need to hear why you're doing what you're doing and why it's going to be beneficial to their readers. Now, the key element to think about here is that you have to line up with whatever it is you're talking about with their readership, because that's who their main demographic is and what they're going for. And so, in your instance, in selling, your services and being an engraver, part of what makes your company unique is you, because it's hard to separate you from your company right now. Your story, your background, why that's interesting. Now, is that story going to be very interesting in the New York Times right now when they're covered through with political stories? Probably not. But if you start looking at other areas, so wedding, that's why I've been saying like wedding planners. Again, I don't know if that's your main business, but the wedding industry has a lot of articles, a lot of magazines. Even then, traditional media outlets have wedding issues. So maybe you're being featured in People magazine during their top things during this wedding season, during this fall wedding season, or even I think actually even other magazine. I don't know if Inc. magazine does. Either way, there's a lot of other traditional articles that are looking for companies like you. The hard part is how do you find them and pitch yourself to them? And that's where, again, we talked about a little bit at the beginning of telling a story. So your ultimate goal then is to get press and to get picked up by the press. You need to cater your message to that journalist and to that reading it. Realize that journalists are very busy and they get terrible emails all the time if someone's like, hey, sell my thing because why? So most of the time they're just not even going to read it. So part of what your job is in the beginning is to develop a relationship with them, contact them in a way that's interesting, and position your story in a way where they're like, yes, of course it's interesting to me. My readers are going to love it. I'm going to get more clicks. That's going to help my job. It's going to ultimately help my career. So yeah, I want to feature you. Part of what helped me in the beginning, when I first started out my bottled water company, was to focus in on the story of my own health journey and how that related to the bottled water. Mm-hmm. So again, that's part of also what makes that interesting, but also partially because of the demographic I was going after. I started local, and I actually recommend everybody does this, even if and I've done this with like large international campaigns, to start local. And I say this because I was living in South Bend, Indiana. Mm-hmm. South Bend, Indiana isn't, for better or for worse, there's not a lot of large companies who are being featured at the Oscars or being featured at other places. And so the first time I was featured at the MTV Video Music Awards, I contacted the local TV station. I contacted the local newspaper, and I pitched them the idea of, here's a local small town company, from a founder who was working on Broadway and now came back to restart their career and to make bottled water because he loved health and wanting to help people. And he is now being featured at the Video Music Awards. Now that alone at the local level is a no-brainer. Like, I was picked up by 4 local magazines and interviewed on 2 different television stations, like piece of cake. So that helped local sales a little bit. I mean, that's not going to help like big time, but that's where things start. When it comes down to PR and you're doing a PR push like this, what you really need to go for is just one. You need one article to kind of get the ball rolling. What happens is, especially nowadays, as I mentioned before, a lot of people are busy, particularly at larger organizations, and they don't really want to do a lot of fact checking. So if you can make their job easier and say, listen, this is what I'm doing. This is why it's interesting to you. This is why your readers will love it. Also, by the way, I've been featured here, here, and here on the same topic. They're like, oh, great. So one of these people over here probably already did their due diligence. I'm sure what you're doing is fine. Let's run it. And it's called trading up the chain. And it's how I've done multiple times to get into bigger and bigger outlets by showcasing that other people have already talked about me. Other people already like my product. And so your readers will too.
This is such value packed with everything that you have talked to us about. Now, can you go a little bit deeper, as in when you're talking about developing a relationship with these journalists, can you just give us a little bit of a tip as to how do you go about doing that, so at least people have a little bit of okay, yeah, I can do this too, because it's very, for the people who don't come across these things or have never done these things, it may be intimidating to them.
Sure, of course. And I know we talk about this at the end, but it's part of the the gift I'm giving out is some elements of this. It was a presentation I gave that went very well. So developing a relationship. So I want you to also think about it on this in your own shoes. Do you like it when you get a cold call from a telemarketer at any time, or when you look at your inbox and there's just some kind of random email that looks like spam that's like, look here. That's what it appears to them when you contact them out of the blue. It looks like spam. It feels like a telemarketer is selling you, and you don't want that impression ever. Like nobody nobody's goal in life is ever to make somebody feel like they're being, a telemarketer. So develop a relationship. There's a couple of different ways to do it. So first, and I say this a lot with other things. So in your own relationships, there's probably somebody that you know that runs a website or runs a blog or probably, a lot of us do that, runs a podcast. Nowadays that circle is getting pretty wide. And so think about when you're first starting off with PR, contacting somebody you know already first, because they will be more inclined to help you promote your product or help you promote what you're doing, or potentially introduce you to somebody else. But let's say, for example, that you don't know anybody. You're starting out fresh. You don't know anybody in any kind of media. That's totally fine. So what you want to do is start looking at magazines, podcasts, other media outlets that you want to be featured in, that are relevant to what you're doing, and you could be relevant to their audience. So because again, we're trying to build value for them. You need to think beyond yourself and the big picture, which is they need more likes, more clicks, more listens. So how can you add value to their audience? Mm-hmm. And so what you want to do is start following them on Twitter. Almost all reporters are on Twitter, and they constantly post all the time. So you look at what they're doing on Twitter, follow them on Twitter, retweet what they're doing. And so you don't want to be stalkerish about this, but you want to act like we all like to be liked. We all like fans. And so maybe you besides liking what they're doing, you like it, you share it, and you say like, this is a great article on engraving. And you recommend that to other people, and maybe it gets some more retweets. But anyway, you start doing that with some of their articles. If there's something you really, really like, you look up their email address and you email them and say, thank you so much for writing this article. I really appreciated this, this, and this. Like, make sure it's sincere. Don't lie. Like, people can read through that. Like, be sincere. And, see, and part of this is just kind of seeing how they're going to react. Like, if they don't want you to contact them, they'll say, thank you so much, don't contact me. Or they'll say something else. You'll know really quickly if you're making them mad, if they appreciate it. And then maybe, a week later, you email them again and say, you know what, I really appreciated this article. Have you thought about this? And you give them a free lead to something else. Or like, I really like it if you wrote about this, which is in their wheelhouse and in their topic. Because also think about this. They're trying to turn out articles a lot. They need to do a lot of writing. Not everybody is as prolific as being able to come up with new ideas every 30 seconds. So giving them an idea for free is always helpful. And then maybe after a couple, like 3 weeks, 2-3 weeks, you have kind of a relationship. It's not really a relationship, but they know enough about you so they've replied potentially. And then you say, I'm working on this. I think it's interesting to you because you've written about this, and I think your audience will like it because of this. Do you want to set up an interview? And you make it really easy for them. Part of what you have to do is make it easy for them. And the other part of this, which is, again, it's like the really kind of nitty gritty and detail stuff, is when you're doing PR pushes, part of what will make you stand out is the ability for the reporter to reach you quickly and easily and get all the information in one fell swoop. So what you want to do is, I do this a lot if I'm doing like a product push or a product launch. You want to create a separate Dropbox that they can easily access, and you put everything that potentially they need for the story in there. So product photos, your photo, your bio, your company bio, your worker bios, like everything they need, so they can go, yeah, okay, so I like your company, I like what you're talking about. Oh, look here, there's the photograph, there's this, there's that. You already kind of told me the details on things. Great. If they want to follow up with you at the very end of your email, you give your phone number and you say you would love to set up a time to have a conversation. Trust me, if they want to, they will let you know. But you've just made it really easy. You've developed kind of this, again, a relationship. Enough so you're not that creepy, annoying telemarketer who's like, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. So you've elevated yourself above average, and really that's all you need. Like, most people will not go through that work. Most people will spam. They'll get it. What they'll do is, there's some websites you can do this. You can get all these reporters' email addresses, and you can email them all at the same time in a spammy looking, like, here's the subject line, da, da, da. I know this because I've done it before. Against my better judgment. It's better to develop a relationship, but there was one time, actually it wasn't too long ago, where I was pressed for time, and there was somebody who said they knew, they were an expert, a PR expert, and they're like, nope, this is how you do it. I do it all the time, and it works great for me. You have to span people 3 different times, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to try doing it both ways. I'm going to break up the list, and I'll do my way and I'll do your way, because I had the time. Their way, I received 0. I did it back. I got 1 response, and that person, actually 3 responses. 2 people wanted me to pay them to promote it was my book, actually, at that time, my book on their site. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And then the other person wanted to interview me and my co-author on their podcast. So it worked. I guess it worked out. I got 1 potential podcast interview, versus the other way I did it. And then I was I got the book featured in like 7 or 8 different articles right away.
Wow.
And we were listed as one of the top 7 books to read about, Bitcoin and finance in 2020.
Wow.
Like all right away. And that was just by, it takes time. And I know this is the part that kind of sucks the most, is it takes time, but it's worth it to develop a relationship and to carefully craft your message. And I'll tell you what, like, now, one of the reporters I chatted with, he actually allowed me to write an article and get the article that I wrote published on his newspaper outlet in June. So it's like, and now he emails me every once in a while to see what I'm up to, and wants to know if I write another article for him, for his outlet. So it's, you never know what's going to happen with these, but it all comes down to kind of the main elements of being human, is we like to buy things from people we like. We like to do things people we like. So, it's be somebody that people like to work with and would like to help out, because if they like you, it makes it so much easier.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for all that. It is a lot of work, but it's very actionable steps that we can actually take if that's the route that we want to go. And that is definitely very informative. And I know that you said this is part of the free gift that you have for us. Would you just let us know a little bit more about this free gift?
Sure. And you say that, and I forgot the title of it, but it was, earlier this year, it was actually 2 months ago. It just feels like a year. So I was asked to give a presentation for Mass Challenge, and Mass Challenge is one of the world's largest nonprofit incubators for companies, and they're all around the world. Their Israel site reached out to me because they had a cancellation. So I'm a advisor to a few different companies there, and I'm also a judge. And so they had heard that I had done some work around PR and marketing, and they just asked if I could just talk about it. And so I created this presentation, which ultimately, as I was told a couple days ago, was voted by their startups as being the top presentation out of 115 that they were given. And so that it's called the 7 little known secrets to getting featured in any publication. And so it's a PowerPoint, and it's written as a PowerPoint. So everything is laid out, but all of the details minus, my backstories are in there. And so you'll find out, here, I'll just give you some, let's see here. I'll give you like the quick, 7 secrets that are like why people should care about you, why and how to find your audience, how to find out how publications work, how to cut corners and meet writers. So I talk about a little bit here. I go into more detail in this PowerPoint, why you shouldn't cold pitch anybody else, the three key elements to a good story. Again, things that I just talked about here. And then how do you make it easy for the journalist to say yes to what you're doing? And so you will find all those in this nice little 16 point PDF that just kind of breaks down without, again, my backstory of this. But again, if your listeners, if they got any value out of what I'm giving out for free, I'm happy to talk over it with them, because sometimes you do need a little more context beyond just the written word.
Thank you so much. That's so generous of you, Yuri. I am so happy that I got to chat with you tonight. Now, for those people who actually want to find you, can you share with us where they can find you?
Sure. So I'm very easy to find online. If you just Google Yuri Cataldo. But so my website is yuricataldo.com. I also have a side consulting company that I run called Art Tech Media. So it's arttechmedia.com. I'm reworking the website right now, so don't judge me on that one. Also, like on Twitter, Facebook, it's Yuri Cataldo, and same with LinkedIn.
All right. Thank you once again. It is so jam-packed with all the information, and it's an absolute pleasure that I got to chat with you. And thank you again.
Of course, Claudia. Thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure.
Yes, I hope I'll get to connect with you soon. Bye.
Definitely. Bye.